Hello world, a new report explains how credit card hackers hide their loot in images, the world's most successful ransomware group rEvil vanishes overnight, and the embarrassing bug that can disable iPhone's Wi-Fi has a version 2. That's in today's episode of The Week Web, where we break down and dissect cybersecurity related tech news. Web security company Securai have published a write-up detailing how malicious hackers have been stealing credit card information from e-commerce websites encoded in images. This is being perpetrated by MageCart. MageCart is an umbrella term used to describe miscreants targeting e-commerce websites. There are a little more than a dozen of these groups, which typically target websites running on the Magento e-commerce platform. Magento is open source and is owned by Adobe. It's used by about 10% of all e-commerce websites online. Securai's write-up explains how after gaining unauthorized access to a website via a vulnerability in Magento itself, or by some other method, after all websites run on servers which could be running a whole host of other exploitable services, after gaining access, the bad actors would inject malicious PHP into the Magento checkout process. In this particular case, the code was cleverly obfuscated, concealing the fact that each time someone entered their credit card information, it would be appended to a seemingly innocuous file, arrow.gif. The idea is to make this file seem completely innocent, to have it look like any other random unimportant icon file, stenographically masking its true contents. Probably because people caught on to creditcards.txt, the criminals would come along later and just download this publicly visible file, and then extract the loot, which could contain hundreds of credit card numbers, which would usually be sold on dark web marketplaces, simply because emptying a whole trove of bank accounts would be a risky business. So MageCart typically sells on individual credit card information at a fraction of its value to others keen on pilfering the victim's accounts. The issue is exacerbated by the fact that e-commerce stores often pay a load of cash upfront for flashy looking websites using Magento, but neglect to pay someone to actually maintain their website, and within a few short years a site becomes vulnerable. Securai explains the problem is made worse by the fact that Adobe, Magento's owners, have taken security patches offline for older versions of Magento. These patches do exist, but you have to manually grab them from GitHub. To put into perspective the scale of the issue, this particular website had 6 different credit card skimmers installed. Credit card fraud is a big business, people are making millions from it, so I suppose it's not too surprising that a website with more holes than a slab of Swiss cheese will attract a horde of rats. In a surprising twist in the ransomware chronicles, the world's most successful ransomware gang, rEvil, has seemingly melted into the ether. Whether they've been vanquished by the feds or if this is a voluntary departure is not immediately clear. Formed in 2019, rEvil quickly became the world's most infamous ransomware gang, both statistically in terms of market share and in the gamut of targets they went after. Some of their greatest hits include stealing Apple product schematics, the meat supply heist, the nuclear weapon contractor hack, and the ballsy recent Kaseya hack, which alone saw 1,500 companies locked up with ransomware. A few days ago, rEvil infrastructure in its entirety went offline. The dark websites they operated, which they called the Happy Blog, has become inaccessible, as well as seemingly every other server related to them. I planned on talking about rEvil porting their malware to Linux, to address some of you Linux supremacists in the comments, but it seems like that's become a bit of a moot point. rEvil themselves didn't announce a departure or leave any clues hinting at some kind of tactical withdrawal. However, there are some credible theories. A rival ransomware gang, Lockbit, is claiming to have intel that rEvil received a government legal request which forced them offline, though this isn't confirmed. If it is true, however, it will have been a request from Russian authorities, as rEvil, being based in Russia, isn't fazed by US law enforcement. Typically, Russian cybercrime gangs have been able to freely operate unhindered as long as they don't attack Russian entities. Due to this fact, Russian-authored ransomware typically runs a language check before it encrypts its victim. If the victim PC is Russian, then the malware will just no-pout and delete itself. It is possible that Russian law enforcement is starting to tackle the ransomware problem. The recent Russia-US summit saw Biden and Putin discuss the issue. At first glance, the stance Biden took seemed to have been rather tepid, but the Russian government, i.e. Putin, really has nothing to gain from these ransomware attacks. They are being carried out by private individuals, which, let's be real, probably aren't paying taxes on their takings. By shutting down the ransomware gangs, it takes away a stick the West uses to beat Russia with. However, that being said, a Kremlin spokesman has said they had no hand in this whatsoever. It could be the case that rEvil was forced to shutter operations for other reasons, such as an internal dispute forcing the group to splinter, and perhaps pop up later under a different moniker. As you can tell, no one really knows what's going on. Other ransomware gangs are unsurprisingly pleased with these developments though. Flashpoint reports that other threat actors are actively celebrating rEvil's demise. Though interestingly, in the wake of all of this, the cybercrime forum XSS has banned the rEvil spokesperson, who went by the username Unknown. According to Flashpoint, this was probably done in an effort to protect the XSS forum itself. If the takedown was a government operation, then they could usurp the Unknown account and use it to infiltrate the forum. rEvil's evaporation has adversely affected some victims of the recent Kaseya ransomware attack. ZDNet reports that one particular victim paid the ransom only to find that the decryption key they were provided doesn't fit the lock. It works on some files, but not others. rEvil usually operates a kind of help desk support system, some kind of live chat feature to assist victims in decryption, but given all rEvil infrastructure has gone AWOL, the victim here has no recourse and is being forced to rebuild from scratch, even after paying the ransom. A few videos ago, I told you about how certain Wi-Fi network names could quite literally crash iPhones. A researcher discovered that by including string format specifiers, used in the C programming language, within a network name, you could disable the Wi-Fi function of any iPhone which tries connecting to it, all because the Wi-Fi network names weren't sanitized in iOS's logging function. However, you could remedy the issue by simply resetting your network settings. You can go watch my previous video for more detail on that bug. It was pretty embarrassing for Apple, a bit of a basic bug to let slip through the cracks. Just a few days after that vulnerability was exposed, the same researcher discovered yet another bug. This one though can almost permanently disable Wi-Fi on an iPhone. It can't be fixed with just a simple reset. In this case, by connecting to a network titled Secret Club Power, you could disable Wi-Fi to the point where you'd have to manually back up your device, edit the offending stored Wi-Fi network names out of the backup, and then restore from said backup. A fix above the capabilities of most iPhone users, I would expect. This of course works via the same mechanism as before, those pesky string format specifiers, but before you go out of your way to change your Wi-Fi SSID in an attempt to get under the skin of iOS users for no reason in particular, this series of bugs was fixed a few days ago. Apple quietly rolled out patches for the vulnerabilities and they exist no more. If you like this kind of video, make sure to help me out by tapping the like button for YouTube AI, as well as turning on those sub notifications. If you're looking for something to watch next, go check out my previous video which covered how a Russian state-sponsored hacking group was found using NordVPN in a recent operation. If you get a lot of value from this series of videos, do consider becoming a channel member. As always, sources will be linked in the video description. Stay tuned for more hacking videos and have a good one.